Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to day 163 of Humanity Rising. Humanity Rising is an initiative of Ubiquity University and 315 or more organizations from around the world that have come together through this extraordinary pandemic that has put almost the entire world under some form of lockdown and a new social meme of keeping our distance from other people and wearing masks, a world in which public health has become an acute and ongoing concern, and now with a virus that shows itself to be unusually intelligent, adaptive, and enduring as we enter 2021 with the pandemic still with us and no end in sight. And as vaccinations begin to be rolled out in country after country around the world, we are hopeful that with enhanced public awareness and public discipline, we can move beyond this pandemic. But for right now, Humanity Rising has created a sacred space so that people from all over the world can come together on a daily basis to share their experiences and their aspirations and their strategic formulations so that come what may, we can ensure that the world beyond the pandemic is more healthy, more regenerative, more abundant, more resilient, and in alignment with natural systems. As we begin today, why don't we just take a moment, as we always do, and just pause. Take a few deep breaths, and close your eyes and place your attention on your heart. And in a spirit of gratitude and deep thanksgiving for the fact that you're alive at this crucial moment in human history, let us just listen to our heartbeat. Thank you, everyone. Now, with an open heart, I would like to introduce our program today. We come now to the fifth and final day of Cities Rising around the world, convened by Marilyn Hamilton and Beth Sanders and a splendid group of people that have been present since Monday. On Wednesday, I mentioned the city of Washington, D.C., where the eyes of the world are focused probably more than any other city in the world right now, given the events of the last 10 days. Yesterday, we started with a focus on Jericho, the oldest continuously inhabited city that we know of in history, going back 11,000 years. Today, I would like to start with the city that probably has inspired the world the most during the pandemic, and that is the city of Amsterdam, in the small country of the Netherlands, where I've lived very happily on and off for the last number of years. It's a beautiful city laced with canals. It's small enough, about 750,000 people. You can walk across most of the city in a very short order or ride your bike. The Dutch are practical, they're friendly, and they look at the world as it is and as it should be. And it was Amsterdam in May, as the pandemic was deepening around the world, that took the leadership in announcing that moving beyond the pandemic, Amsterdam was going to embrace donut economics, which has been envisioned, as you probably all know, by Kate Raworth from Oxford University, also from Cambridge University, who has envisioned a whole new form of economics, not around GDP or tax income or trade, but around human well-being and how we can develop a thriving human community, attuning ourselves through biomimicry with natural systems and constraints. And that decision reverberated around the world, and city after city, regions, in fact, and several countries decided they too were going to follow Amsterdam's lead and embrace donut economics. And we were thrilled, and working with Ed Muller, who's the president and founder of the University of International Cooperation in Costa Rica. We put together a 7-day program in July and another 5-day program in October, where we brought specialists, including Kate Raworth and her team, and various other notables in the field of donut economics, regenerative economics, circular economics, to really begin to envision a world that not only works for humanity, but works for humanity within the context of who we actually are. We are nature. We are the environment. And that led to the creation of a coalition. And the coalition decided to come together and create a whole new MBA, which Luis Camargo, who's been with us on this program over the last couple of days, christened as the Masters in Regenerative Action. And I was on the call, and as soon as he said those words, Masters of Regenerative Action, everybody applauded with one accord. So we've been working together to launch a whole new master's, not in business administration, as if business is boring and you just administer things, but a master's in how we regenerate the world through actions that will make a difference at a critical time in human history. So Luis, I want to thank you for the name, because the name is a crucially important aspect. How you name something gives it its energetic quality. And I'm delighted to say that we'll be rolling out courses with this new MBA. We'll be uploading descriptions over the next month or two on the Ubiquity University website. But the course that Marilyn and Beth designed on Beyond Resilience, Cities Beyond Resilience, that we're going to roll out starting next week, and you'll see the link in the chat box, is going to be the first course of this new MRA. So Humanity Rising has been inspired by a city. Cities are the fulcrum for most of the human population in the world today. 90% of all the people in the industrial world live in cities. 50% of all the people in Asia, Africa, Latin America live in cities. So cities are where the rubber hits the road for almost all of humanity in one way or another. Every capital city that controls the politics of every country is in a city. And so we can't underestimate the power of cities. And so Beth and Marilyn will be back down the road of Humanity Rising as we continue to unfold. One of the exciting aspects of our Masters in Regenerative Action is we're linking the courses with cities, and Marilyn and Beth are curating that space for us so that practitioners seeking regeneration in cities can take the kind of courses that they need to enhance their strategic effectiveness. And then Ed Muller, who's been on the the United Nations Commission on Biodiversity, is assembling a network of bioregions. So the courses that we are going to be putting together will be linked with practitioners in the bioregeneration of the world and in the cities as they regenerate themselves around the world. So that's a beautiful vision that has galvanized a growing coalition of individuals, teachers, and organizations worldwide that has come out of that single inspirational act from Amsterdam. I just want to also just express at the beginning here my deep appreciation for all of you folks in the ChatAction group. Our after session chat group is becoming as important to Humanity Rising as any other thing that we're doing. And I just want to acknowledge all of you that have been working in the chats and the PowerPoints that are coming up, the daily summaries of our sessions, the distribution, and encourage all of you who can to join our after session chat group because it is very dynamic and becoming a foundational part of Humanity Rising as we move forward. So thank you, everyone. It's very exciting to start the year this way. And now I'd like to turn the program over to Beth Sanders, who you all know as the president of Populist Planning and the extraordinarily powerful book, Nest Cities. Beth?
Thank you, Jim. What a wonderful platform to start on today with the words Master of Regenerative Action. Because
yes,
the trajectory for this week was like ideas, thinking about things in different ways, generate some ideas on Thursday, and today is Friday, and Marilyn and I had named the purpose of today was to think about how we want to mobilize ourselves and take action. And for sure, all week we've been supported in these calls after these calls. Marilyn and I call it part 1 and part 2 for our days because we're fully here now and we're fully in for part 2. There's beautiful gems of ideas that I get to witness in people that they're taking action. So I'm going to build on this to introduce everyone who's joined us on the panel today. I'm quite energized by taking action and supporting people in taking action. And one of the, I like to call it handles, like one of the handles I give myself and the people I work with to navigate the systems of the city is what Marilyn calls the 4 voices +1. So I'm just going to lay out what they are with some examples that I've seen this week. And then I'm going to ask all the people on the call on the panel today, all of our guests, to introduce themselves using this. So here are the 4 voices. The first voice I'll mention is the voice of the citizen. And this is typically one we all can recognize, but I've heard some specific examples of action people are going to take as a result of this week from that stance of the citizen. So I met someone who's stepping up to clean up a creek in her neighborhood. I met somebody who's starting a conversation in her neighborhood this week. She said she's starting it about homelessness. I met another citizen who's just imagining a shift in how he wants to activate himself and others by invoking an age of helpfulness. So that's the voice of the citizen noticing how they wish to participate in city life. A second voice is the voice of the public institution. So that could be City Hall. It could be an education, like a school board. It could be a school system. I heard someone say, I just want to know, what is my role in government now? That's an inquiry someone is undertaking as action. A third voice is that of the business community. Someone asked, empty buildings. I'm a business owner. I have empty buildings because of COVID. How could my buildings be used for homes or other community uses, maybe to grow food? I heard the fourth voice in action. So community organizations, nonprofit, third sector, many different parts of the world use different language for this one. But I heard a woman say, I want to think about how I work with the refugee camps differently. I want to think of them now as innovation hotbeds. I heard someone else say, well, what if we rethink community organizations instead of being like a whole bunch of unmet needs that we're trying to resolve? What if we shift that and to think about community organizations as shamans? So 4 very different voices. And this is just a sampling of the little ways I've witnessed people percolating how they wish to participate and take action in city life. They're acting in new ways. And this is what we want to mobilize today. So I'm going to invite my guests here to put their cameras on. And I'm going to ask you to, and I'm going to go through the 4 voices again, just to make sure you can land it. And I'm going to ask the audience to notice how you would answer this question too. So the 4 voices are: as a citizen, as a public institution, as a business, or as a community organization or third sector. And there's a 5th option, which could be that you do all 4 at once. But my question is, and we're going to do this quite quick, so do not overthink it, is you're going to tell us your name, you're going to tell us the city you live, and please tell us, which voice do you mobilize through? Which voice do you mobilize through? I'll go first, and then Marilyn, and then I'll call on Stanley next. So my name is Beth. I live in Edmonton, Canada, and I mobilize through that 5th integrator voice. Marilyn, and then Stanley.
Hi, I'm Marilyn, and I'm in Findhorn Eco Village in Scotland, and I mobilize through that 5th integrator voice too, but I'm also a diversity generator a lot of times.
Okay, which is the business voice.
The innovators, yes.
Yeah, okay. Stanley, and then Mira Michelle, please.
I also mobilize through the 5th voice, which is the integrator and facilitator. And I'm adding to that I am bringing love to that integration.
Thanks, Stanley. Mira Michelle, and then Julian, please.
Hi, I'm Mira Michelle. I presently live south of Hanover in Germany, and I mobilize through, I would say, also all 4. And the 5th one for me would be the spirit world.
Perfect. Thanks, Mira Michelle. Julian, and then Hugo, please.
I'm Julian. I'm based in Berlin, joining today from San Miguel de Allende in Mexico. I'm mobilizing also through the 5th voice, and strongly interacting with the 4th voice.
Okay, thank you very much. Hugo, and then Patty, please.
So my name is Hugo Araujo. I'm living in Genval, in Belgium, and I come from Mexico City. And my voice is business.
Thank you. Patty, and then Raji, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Paddy from Cape Town in South Africa, and I also generate my work through the integrative voice of all of them.
Thank you. Raji, and then Taina.
Hi, everyone. My name is Raji. I'm here from Colombo, Sri Lanka. And I think the voice that drives me most is probably the citizen voice through the work that I do, if I'll pick the right category.
Perfect. There's no wrong category. Okay, Taina and then Luis.
Hi, everybody. I'm Taina Ketala from Tampere, Finland. And about these four voices, I could say like all of them, but what is the most that I think that I work and what mobilized me through is the innovator and the business community. But I also the second voice, the public institution. So between those.
Okay, that's good. Thanks, Taina. Luis.
Yes, how are you? Happy to be here again. Speaking from Bogota, Colombia. And I actually mobilized through, I think, the integrator voice with a focus on civic and public institutions through schools, but activating the voice of nature, which I wish it would be the first one here.
Maybe there is no first and nature holds them all.
There you go. The embracing one.
Spirit holds them all, nature holds them all. But you know, us humans, like we show up in a variety of ways. What I found the value of these is they all are legitimate. And they often have different centers of gravity in terms of their priorities. But when they come together, like some really neat magic can happen on the ground with people that might be in conflict. It's very super helpful. Quick technical question for Rick behind the scenes. If you could pull in Jorge, who's in the audience, he's here and prepared to be one of our reflective practitioners today. So Rick, if you wouldn't mind looking after that, and we can introduce Jorge after this next piece. We're going to hear from Marilyn and Hugo, who are going to reflect on the week. And then, oh, here's Jorge. Let's jump in and look after that. Are you really here, Jorge?
I am here. I would say we are here.
We are here. Perfect.
There you go. So, hi everyone. My name is Jorge. I'm based in Jonjague, which is also known as Montreal. It's a traditional Mohawk territory in what is now Canada. And yeah, I would say my voice is really the community organization and the nonprofit third sector.
Perfect. Good to have you. Glad we stitched you through. So thanks for flagging for us that you were here in the audience. Thank you very much. Okay, Marilyn, the plot for so our reflective practitioners know and our audiences, we're going to hear from Marilyn and Hugo for a little while in a reflection on the week. And then we'll call on the reflective practitioners on your reflections on the week, in particular around how you're mobilizing. Okay, Marilyn, over to you.
Thanks, Beth. And Hugo, you're going to join me in conversation, and I think it will probably be very useful if you share your screen, because earlier today, Hugo, and I noticed that our chat group missed you yesterday. And yesterday you were not able to be with us, but you've done your homework and you have been listening to our session on practicing mutual agency. And on the screen, Jorge, I can see that you've laid out your wonderful patterns for the whole week. So maybe you could just check in with me and let's have a little conversation as we're talking about what we're looking at on the screen. Can you tell us what you've drawn here?
Yeah, thank you. So this is an integration of the four creations that I've done over the week. And let me explore one by one. So you can You can have access to these ones in the chat. I'm just putting the link in case that you want to explore it as well on your own. So the first part, it is the day of activating cities as a scale. And it was more about...
That was the first day. And that was when we had as our focus reflective practitioner, that was Mark McCaffrey, and he brought in his powers of 10, right? So what did you notice in the conversation with that?
Yeah, so I think there were two kind of forces that just really struggled my mind on a comfortable and uncomfortable positions. And most of the uncomfortable part was about human-made developments. And on the other side, comfortable was more about water things. But in the middle, we have all these practitioners, all these people that we call ourselves unusual people, but who is not unusual in general, right? So it is more about love, dialogue, experiencing, being human, sharing, educational, entangled relationships, local scale and uncertainty, and of course the power of 10. And then in the second day, the topic was about living in cities as complex adaptive systems. And in here we jump a little bit more into how biology works, how nature works, and how we are part of this vibration that comes from life, and how cities could be a living system. And from this living system, how we could actually create a community of healers and weavers and bring this movement into the equation of cities and life.
Hugo, before you move on, could you go back and just focus in a little bit so people could see more clearly, because we can't see on the screen all the things that you know that are there. So is it possible for you just to like, yeah, right, so that we can see that it's possible to get down into some detail and see the words?
Yeah, so it was about the voices of the human hive, which is just a metaphor that I really love, because we really should be working as a superorganism. And it is, as I was saying, about the life vibration and how living systems, they are part of nature, but also we analyze it from the part of biology. And this is like something alive with purpose, sensing. And these are all characteristics of this reflection organ, a reflective organ, and the body, the root system, and its life. So it was about holding emotions, feelings, and getting connection, but also about this heart and capacity of love. But as a part of an ecoregion, as a part of a planet. And I think this is part of our conversation today as well. How can we, as a species, we can add value to the whole, to the planet? So could be...
That's beautiful. That question that you asked earlier when we were talking about how can we add value to the planet is a question for our whole species, right? And so this living, looking at cities as complex, adaptive living systems really totally reframes it from bricks and mortar to something that is alive and dynamic and growing and evolutionary. So yes, and then that took us into Wednesday, and our topic there was governing with life cycle patterns. So let us have a look at how you captured both what I noticed, and you might comment on this. There looks like there's nodes and then lines connecting them all. So those are the relationships that you were noticing?
Yeah, so I let emerge this conversation, and I think this worked more as an artist, because it is not something that I have a structure in my mind before in general, but just trying to go with the flow of the conversation. So in this case, we started with this idea of cities being the center or the epicenter of the economic power. And it was really interesting to see how we perceive as humans as with different clusters. But there is one cluster that brings us all together, which is being innovative. So innovative humanity as a spiritual agents, I would say. So this idea that you put on the table about caring for yourself, caring for the others, caring for the place, and then getting deeper. I love this part, because getting deeper into what the earth is and caring for the earth. Then if we understand the earth as a living system, there are so many things that we can see there, like coevolution, belonging, interbeing. And these are patterns that also help us to trust on each other which is not the same case when you have hate, for example. But when you have love, when you have giving, gratitude, shared purpose, feelings, self-organization, that you are building on trust. And then just for finishing this conversation at the end, also with Vandana, of course, it was very interesting, the idea of democracy and how democracy might have been just enhancing the different kinds of leverage points that we should reimagine democracy in a way that enhances trust and that enhances living system in a different way.
Yeah, so that was really Vandana remarked that she had these 10 principles of Earth democracy. And for me, it was like unpacking this master code of care for self, so we can care for others, so we can care for our places, and altogether care for the planet. So this seemed to me to be like the kernel of what we were trying to reimagine how governance in a living system might operate. So what happened yesterday? You weren't here. So what did you hear about practicing mutual agency? This will probably surprise people.
Sorry for not being here. And as I say, like I like to enjoy also my work, and this is my way of adding value. So I thought about the hive. You mentioned so many times, and I really love this visualization of the human hive. That I put myself into the challenge of bringing a hive as a visual that the people could actually explore. But in this case, there are just 6 relationships in between each bubble. So you cannot just repeat relationships, but it was more about just getting the wording and connecting in one place or in another in the hive. So I think it's a little bit more hexagonal in a way. And so my thinking here was, I've heard a lot of colonialism and how the economic power, again, it is enhancing colonialism, wars, races, development. And this is just one part of the story, but it is true that as power goes with density, we can also see that with density, we have more epidemics, danger, for example. And this kind of epidemics, it could be predated in a way that diminished by diversity, for example. And this diversity is, of course, not the goal of the parties in the political way. So then I also heard Beth saying about that we are what we work in the territory, in the land, in the place that we live. And I think that was a beautiful way to put it, because it is not just actually about how we build the city, but how we interact with the place. And this is by adding value to the habitat. So that brought me also in an interesting perspective as a biomimic on viruses, because viruses, they could be whether positive or negative. So the negative, they kill the host, they don't evolve anymore. But the positive ones, they enhance the living system, they enhance the habitat. So what if we can be this human hive that you are letting us envision and bring this value to the habitat? And what if by the activities that we do, that also adds value? So in total, I saw that this piece was more about entry points. So I put these 3 circles, three bubbles as an entry point. So one way will be to get here as the island of relationships. So the vision, the hopes. The other one will be to get there as business as usual almost. And the other one that I think it was also important, and it was a mention, but not a lot of stress in this one, is the families. So how the families as core of the society could actually make us vibrate. So which entry point do we choose to live in, and how can we make it happen? So yeah, this was the 4th day.
And so I love how you've captured, from just listening to our conversation in the little bubbles, the themes that we were talking about, but then your own inquiry, your own curiosity asked around families. And we had a really interesting conversation about, you were saying, in looking at human habitats, not all people live in cities, and particularly as a biomimicrist, you were thinking about the Amazon. So what were you commenting on? What was your curiosity about people who live in the Amazon versus people who live in cities?
Yeah, so my thinking went in 2 poles. So one is the cities, and the other one is fully nature. But in the middle, we have already people that have been able to be in land and respecting the land and respecting nature. So, for example, Amazonian people, they were having already these permaculture gardens, as we call them, but we don't recognize them. And this is part of our conversation from north to south somehow. But they've been living there without us having traces of them as cities, but they've been having like really huge communities. And for example, I was also telling about the Mayan people that I experienced living with in the Mayan Peninsula, that they used to live in cities, and the cities now, which are the pyramids, they are desertic. But the Mayans that have survived, that evolved and survived, they live in small little communities where they have this kind of house that is actually bringing biodiversity to their own gardens and enhancing the territory. So I think this is just a beautiful way of seeing things. And also the last story that I would like to show and to share, it's the bioluminescence one, because I think it's just beautiful. Bacteria, when we think about cities and density of population, then bacteria, whenever they reach a certain density in the Hawaiian bobtail squid, they can trigger decision-making process that I call quorum sensing. And this quorum sensing is bringing a light organ inside the Hawaiian bobtail squid that allows a symbiotic relationship that allows the Hawaiian bobtail squid to erase the shadow when there is full moon, so to not to be seen by predators. So that brought us to this conversation of how are we adding value? If we take out the trees out of the equation, it is not something that you should do because they're adding so much value. If you take out the bees out of the equation, it is not something smart because they're adding so much value. As a young species, how are we going to add value to the place that we live? And I think this vibration comes from the inner out. So if you add value to your surrounding, you can just be simple and effective in a way. What do you think, Marilyn?
Yeah, so I think this is a beautiful question of coming back to what value do we add to the earth? So when we were talking about it, I was trying to imagine, so if we disappeared, who would miss us on earth? What other part of the ecology would notice that we'd gone? And until our species can actually mature so that we're adding value, that if we disappeared, we would be missed, I don't think we're achieving what the balanced ecologies already have in other ecoregions. This has been a question I've asked for decades about cities. In bees, they produce 20 pounds of honey to support themselves internally in the hive, and they pollinate their whole ecoregion. The earth knows what value bees add. And so I wonder what humans add. Thank you, Hugo, for taking us through our week. I would like you to take us back to the map that we started for today, because we actually borrowed a pattern from day one, just to sort of create a background for where our conversation might go today. So if you could show us what's there under integrating coherence for regenerativity, which is our topic for today.
So you want me to click here?
Yeah, please. Imagining what's going to be there. Yes, so wow. So here's something that really, when I first met Mark McCaffrey, I went, wow, this is an amazing pattern of what he calls the power of 10. And the powers of 10 are how he's imagined different scales of human systems emerging from power 0, which is the individual, to the power of 1. And I think if you can maybe focus in, zoom in, we can see that there is a family in there. So after the power of 1, after the power of 0 rather, the power of 1 is actually 10. And 10 is what he related to the family. So I think this way of looking at the possibility of the emergence of human systems over time allows us to have what I call an overview effect from the natural systems that are emerging. So what we did, Hugo, was I suggested maybe this was a pattern we could notice as we have our group discussions today with our reflective practitioners, to think not only about where we've come from in the beginning of the week, but how this circles back and actually is a way that we can maybe include everything from looking at the living systems that Lewis brought in for us, to governance as a living system and thinking about the master codes of care and earth principles, and what we looked at yesterday, so that we were able to think about what happens when we practice mutual agency, the relationship between ourselves as individuals and all the others. So Hugo, is there anything else you'd like to add in our conversation that has been really important for you to have the experience of this week, to rethink cities as not a burden on the world, but something that Gaia herself has evolved for a purpose? I say it's her being her reflective organs. Can you see any hope for us that as a human species, we will be able to add value to the earth?
Yeah, I think the hope, at least in me, is something that I cannot take away. I prefer to be living than to be dying, and I prefer to enjoy being here. So the way I like to think about it, it is about ecological niche. So all the species, they build these not critical mass, but critical connections in between them, and they co-evolve over time. So for example, the birds and the flowers, they build this mutual trust over time, over many generations, and at the end they end up by having the shape that helps each other. So I think as a young species, we have all the place to learn and all the way to mature and to bring value to the system. So I would like to see this city, Mexico City, for example, as something that adds so much value to its own biosphere, that actually you don't want to take it out from there, because it is taking every niche, it is taking every space to bring life to the planet. So I really enjoyed this vision of every city in the planet being actually as an important part of the living texture by weaving life in a very special way. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Hugo. We're going to circle back, and I'm going to ask you to show one more slide after we hear from everyone else. So Beth, could I invite you to invite our other reflective practitioners to reflect on the week?
Yes, and let's pause to let that land. So I'll just invite everyone to do what you do in your being, to let that flurry of insight settle. Thank you, Hugo, for all the extra attentive listening that you're doing on behalf of everyone, and mirroring that back to us each day, and then in a more robust today. It's lovely and helpful. And for anyone joining the call today, that this is your first call on Cities Week, you have a sense of the territory we've been covering. What I'd like to do with our reflective practitioners here is, in letting that land and settling in the understanding that we are each part of a living system in our bodies, but also in our communities, our cities, the species, the planet. And the work that we do and how we show up in the world is also a part of that living system. So both within, but outside of us, when we cannot avoid being in contact with other humans and other creatures and all other life, what we do and how we act is also what shapes that living system. And then it shapes us, and then we shape it, and then it shapes us. So here's my invitation to you folks, is thinking back over the week, however you wish to do that, or feeling back over the course of the week. What specifically is regenerating through you, and how does it change the work you do? or the action you take? What is regenerating specifically through you, and how does it change the work that you do, the action that you take? And as we've done on other calls, we're looking for a reflection of about a minute. So please keep track of time a little bit yourself. And I'm going to call on one of you and I'll let you know who the next one is. And if anyone needs to pass, just pass and I'll circle back to you. And I'll start with Stanley and then I'll call on Mira Michelle. Stanley.
Yeah. A couple of things that are regenerating through me during this week. The biggest one is just the removal of doubt, which I think is my biggest enemy. It's like, I know I can and I do contribute, but sometimes I'm doubtful about how far I can go, especially how far I can go in terms of putting. We talked about, we have been talking about the nature of our relationships, and naming what it is that is at the center of our relationship is what energizes the space and the relationship, which is what Jim was talking about in his introduction today. And that doubt means that I sometimes compromise on what needs to be done. And being here this week has just energized me to see that, yes, there is things that needs to be done. And yes, I can go as far as I know how. How does that look like in terms of my work? I am thinking about the work that we do through the Natural Step, sustainability and advising on sustainability. There was a talk here about beyond regeneration, you know. And if there is a hierarchy, it is sustainability and then there's regeneration. And I'm thinking that this is where we need to be, whether we are dealing with companies or we are dealing with communities. We have to be going beyond regeneration because the time for sustainability has passed. And so that's what is boiling in me now. And I thank you all for giving me that energy and giving me removing the doubt. Thank you.
Thank you. Mira Michelle and then Jorge, please.
Yeah, thank you, Sister Beth. Many things churn up within me, many reflections I've had this week. It's been wonderful to be here with you, waxing and weaving together. What first comes up in me strongly is specify. Specify. I feel that in the root, grounding my work, because I work in so many different ways and formats that it can become overwhelming. And today my computer crashed, so that was like, that was a really big special. I'm on my son's computer right now. So that, and then this feeling of this call to action. With all of this wonderful sharing and this precise information coming through, hit my field like, almost like a wave of fire. Like, you know, like this fierceness came up in me, like, come on, we can do this. We need to do more. We need to take the mother by the hand. We need to rise up in our power. We're also powerful, right? And then that would ebb back to me, back to the personal, right? And then it would say specify. So I think that's my teaching, because I'm doing a lot with regeneration. I moved from the city. I've lived in cities so long. I moved in much more into the nature. I'm a nature freak. You know, forests have grown up on our around us, mushroom people have come, like all the birds, so great to be in a wild place. So yes, regeneration for me is getting specific with ourselves and what is real for us to bring forth.
Thank you, Mira Michelle.
Thank you, darling.
Jorge, and then Julian, please.
Thank you, Beth. I would say that I've been thinking a lot about relationships, silence, and time. And by relationships, I mean I've seen in my city, I'm sure like most of you, that there are so many businesses that are closed and organizations that are just fading away in light of the pandemic. So I'm thinking of treating my relationships with care, humanity, and compassion, and being very realistic on what we're expecting from one another, and sometimes not even expecting anything at all, just expecting that the other person is doing well. When it comes to silence, I'm really trying to speak up and take space just when it's necessary, because I feel right now there's just this storm of news and information all over the place. So I feel that silence is an act of rebellion sometimes. And when it comes to time, I'm always mindful, especially in my work, that we're running out of time. So we really need to get, sorry for the language, we need to get our S together. We have no time. 2030, that's the deadline for humanity. So let's build a better futures and more just futures together. Thank you.
Thank you, Jorge. Julian, and then Raji, please.
Through our conversation yesterday, I was really, I was able to solve a paradox for me, because I was rereading Thomas More's Utopia recently, and this 500-year-old humanist treaty is already unfolding an insular urban vision. And yesterday we talked about the islands of relationships and coherence. And Utopia has always, in that sense, been a riddle for me, because the title refers to good place, oitopia, and utopos, non-place. So I found it always a shame that the good place apparently doesn't really exist. And what fell into place yesterday for me is that the good place, this not place, is maybe just not meant to be a physical place, but a state of consciousness and connections. It's the islands of relations and coherence that we are connecting between each other also when we are so far apart. So I've been taking two things with me that are really important for the work that I'm doing with co-creating Europe. It is that utopias unfold locally, bond to a place, but really also place independent as a state of mind. And that islanders have always been great travelers. When we live on these islands, we have to learn to travel and to meet each other. And I feel what we've been doing here is kind of traveling, but being in one place, but really bringing in the energy and the wisdom from places, from amazing places and islands all around the world. Something that co-creating Europe also aims to do with the Caravan of Unity. We designed a format to travel without traveling, to visit each other, to link up and lift up. And this idea of this kind of travel is maybe one indication how we could do what Indra said yesterday with going beyond the islands. So yeah, this is what was very alive for me after being here with all of you.
Thank you, Julian. Raji, and then Tina, please.
Thanks, Beth. Thanks, everyone. One of the sessions that resonated with me was actually the one at the beginning of the week on activating agency. Even in today's Four Voices question, I felt that I was the voice of the citizen, coming from the perspective of what is it that I do in work. Now, as a teacher, listening to these sessions and thinking about a city as an organism, and all of us are part of it. I like the concept that we heard of today about a hive of humans. that do things to help regenerate. We're a positive virus rather than a negative one. And in order to be that, we have to activate as much agency as possible. So this week has given me a renewed sense of passion and commitment for what I do, because, you know, in teaching kids about the SDGs or about soft skills, how to work together, these sorts of things are very important. Even the act of meeting here together in this session is inspiring some sense of agency in all of us. So that's sort of my takeaway from this. And thank you everyone for all your contributions.
Thanks, Raji. Tina and then Luis, please.
About this week, I attended here Monday and Wednesday and now Friday, and I think I have learned so much. And as I am this kind of introvert, I like to listen more than speak. And as I listen, maybe I'm just so calm, but you know, the all fussy what's happening in my head at the moment when I listen to someone. And I think this was good week to hear different stories and to hear the problems and the pain that there is in different cities in our planet, and that really made me think, as I come from the happiest country in the world, and I think that I may be in some point quite naive and childish, because I'm living quite easy life, and for me I maybe feel that is it right for me to have this kind of life, to have so easy. so that's what I felt, that what I have heard this week. But I think what I want to say in the end here, although it's not end, that maybe it's a beginning, but I think there is always this small way in bunch of snow that you can find, and there is this path that you can find. And I live quite close to nature all the time, and my city is very much under what nature brings us. This week we have -25 cold and a lot of snow, and what I think that what this pandemic has taught us, that we have to live much more slowly, not so fast, because nature gives us pandemic and snow and obstacles and difficulties. So then we have to like go back and be like silent and think about how we can go and what we can do.
Thank you, Tina.
Thank you.
Thank you. Luis and then Patty, please.
Yes, thank you. And it's lovely to hear this, because I think for me, the first element that comes from this week is something I'm calling supporting resonance. And I think in our work, you know, we sometimes feel very lonely because we're pushing against what seems to be an unsurmountable wall. But I guess that wall has been created by ourselves too, in our minds. Because as I've seen and met within all of Humanity Rising, and especially this week, is that there is a supporting resonance. We do have a common sense of what north we want to follow as humans. And if we have conversations with people on the street, they will synchronize in that resonance. But we're having difficulty putting it in action. So that's important. And I think what emerged in that common resonance or supporting resonance is the concept of really putting our attention into opening our heart, acting with kindness, respect, and embracing love in all our relations to build the true city we want to see and the true community we want to build. And in that possibility, it comes into the critical importance of harmonizing dysfunctional relationships with ourselves, with others, and with nature. And this brings something very important that I took from this week is that concept of separation. Separation emerged every day, and that is associated with my view of polarities and conflict and how that is really inhibiting change for positive change right now in the world. And separation, cities have been a factor of separation between humans and nature. And this is something we have to bring into the table, because if we look at all the conversations, we have been reaffirming that we are nature. And it's really important for us to allow nature to become city and city to become nature in order to activate, a regenerative shift towards regenerative cities. And in that sense, we need to open our hearts to let nature come back to ourselves and our spiritual realizations and the way we see ourselves as human. We are nature. And in that sense, if we are nature, our relationships, human relationships, are natural relationships. That if they're going to thrive, they have to become mutualistic, symbiotic, and they have to add value. They have to create the conditions for life to exist, as we've heard from Hugo and other conversations. But in this sense, it means that cities must really strengthen their relationship with nature, and they have to become part of this equation and have to become this niche that Hugo mentioned, where they become a functional unit of natural systems. And in that way, we can synchronize and harmonize and become supporting resonance for life. Thanks.
Thank you, Luis. Lovely. Patty, and then Marilyn, I'm going to swing over to you after Patty. Patty?
Thank you. Thank you so much. There have been so many emotions and sensations and dimensions to just sitting here listening, entering into the visions, entering into the art and the poetry and the pathos, the elation, all of it. The senses have just moved through my body. And I've been expanded in the dimensionality of that by all of you. I'm incredibly grateful. What's sitting with me at the moment is a quote that I've got here around: man has a changing relationship with nature. Nature lives off us and we live off nature. I eat nature to live and nature eats me to live. Neither nature or I die. We simply change places. And what is coming up for me is a conversation I had around with someone over a table conversation around, that we're not needed. We as humans, Marilyn, to quote you, we're not really needed. Nature doesn't need us. The earth doesn't need us. Our ego gets in the way, and my call to myself is both that kind of humility that needs to be cultivated in the silence, was where we can find God, where we can find ourselves, where we can find nature. And how can I do that? What I've taken away from every day, I've learned something more in a different aspect, is that comprehension, that prehension and comprehension of being able to see the different dimensions, learn from it, and know that I can be that tiny part in helping a community like us grow, in bringing us back to nature and to God.
Thank you, Patty. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. Thank you, Beth. So Patty, I just want to respond to I do think, even though we haven't discovered how to add value, we haven't got our intentions aligned with what our calling is. When I heard James Lovelock say, oh no, humans are not just a bane on the earth. They have been evolved as Gaia's reflective organs. I went, wow, I had no idea that my work really had an evolutionary impulse. And ever since then, I've taken that as an invitation for the work of exploring human systems at the city scale. And so I've been asking the question that Ugo was asking when he was sharing earlier around what value is it that we add to the earth? And I'd like to invite Hugo to come back in and share your screen again. And I don't know if you have anything to share about what you've already captured for today, but there was one vortex that we looked at earlier when we were talking before the session that was around Europe. And you could show us how the whole neural network of a whole globe would look like. And I wondered if you could share that with us, Hugo, because I think it kind of captures for us, yes, the level of complexity. When we looked at each day in our earlier views of the vortexes that you had laid out, I asked you, is it possible to layer them in multi-dimensions so that we can interconnect across them? And because this is an evolving process, you suggested that we could after day 5 and there would be more work required. And rather than not have that image, I asked if you could bring this biomimicry image of a global ecosystem in. And you can see now that you put some of the labels on the one that you have here. This amazing view of even a map that I didn't spend any time on this week, which I would call map 3, the one that shows the evolutionary development of all the individuals, every little node that you can see in the image that Hugo's got up here. Imagine they're one of us developing through a lifetime, and that as we connect in different places, and what we've been focusing on is cities and not nations, or even different interests, then we're able to create really strong connections that go, I think, reflecting from individuals to high performance teams and going back into communities and the whole city. One of the things that, thank you very much, Ugo, I think this is the picture I wanted people to see, the dynamics, and that it allows a kind of a hive view, give that overview effect. And did you have any comment that you wanted to make, Ugo, after you've listened to everybody here, or anything yet to share on what's emerged for day 5 on your vortex? Is it too soon? You have to
wait a little bit. Yeah, thank you.
Wait a little bit. Okay, thank you. Thank you for continuing to listen. So I want to invite Beth into a conversation, because one of the things that's come up in conversation this week, both here and in the chat, is some people imagine when I talk about integral city, that at some point in the future, we're going to kind of all levitate into what we call level 7 or systemic view of the world, and we'll just all be there. And I want to say, for me, that doesn't represent a living system at all. If you look at the forest behind Lewis, you know, it started with seeds and the DNA in those seeds and the ecology and the symbiosis that emerged through all of those beings in that forest. And a city is no different. We are always going to grow up from fetus to birth to child to young teenager, adult, mature adult, into our elderhood. And this is regenerativity isn't a state, it's a process, it's a cycle. And when I think of living systems, what I learned very early on was they only have 3 qualities. They have to survive, they have to connect with their environment, and they must regenerate or reproduce. So I just wanted to bring that into the conversation. And since Beth and I are often having conversations about what we're noticing in places that we're working or people that we're talking with, Beth, how does that sit with you when you go back to the four voices, or you go back to the family, or you go back to the workplace?
From a shamanic practice perspective, what I often articulate or just remind myself that ordinary reality is where I live. It's the planet on which I live. I must ground myself well in ordinary realities, so that, because that's where the work is with other people, and that's where the work is to create a city that serves people well, but also all of the life that we're relying on. So there's no question for me that it's not about there being a finish line, that everybody must develop to a certain stage of development, because there are always people in different stages of development, and it might be based on age, because there's always children learning, there's always teenagers doing stupid things, like there's always going to be that. We're never getting rid of that. There are always cultures or pockets of people at different stages of development. Life conditions change, and we may drop in our way of being in a way that's far more survival oriented than where we would normally operate. That too is normal, and we're experiencing that for sure with the pandemic. We definitely see it in our cities on the ground, or as Jorge, who sent me a note that he had to slip off, when Jorge was articulating about the business storefronts that are missing, they're closed. I've seen that in my city. Those are livelihoods for both the owners and the employees. So for me, the times that we're in call a much greater degree of compassion with people who have a lived experience that is quite different than mine. So the learning journey for me has been, in using the four voices, is understanding I used to be in a place where all business is bad, corporate greed, all this stuff. But then when I settle into the understanding that the business community are the innovators, they're trying out new things, they're creating solar panels, they've been doing geothermal for years. They definitely in my city have found, not all business, I'm not painting with a broad brush here, but the entrepreneurial spirit of, I need to invent a new way of getting the food that I make out into the city, into people who want to enjoy it. And they're making it, they're making a go of it. But what support do others need that don't have those opportunities? There's a recalibration underway amongst those four voices. And this is the exploration I am for sure in. It's got its hooks in me. What now is the role for our city government? It's not what it's been. It's going to have to change. What is the role for citizens? I think citizens have been growing into something new, but I don't know that we're in a place where we can be who we've always been if government can't do things for us because our city government budgets are evaporating. And we will soon see in our national governments in countries where aid is being provided to people who've lost their jobs or to pay them to stay home when they are sick. We're going to see a whole recalibration at a national scale, international scale as well. But what does that mean for community organizations in the third sector? What are they going to do differently? So we're in this really tricky mess, but it is an opportunity to notice, well, who do we want to be? What direction do we want to move in relative to climate or equity? Who do we want to be? And who's going to play what role to get there? And for all of us, I just can't help but ask, so what do we know and understand differently this week? And how is it going to change how I behave?
I love that question, Beth.
Okay.
Let's capture that. You are always good at coming up with a question. Why don't we do another round to bring everybody in? Because this is about mobilization today. So let's have that question again, Beth, and let's do another round.
What do I know and understand differently? And how is it going to change how I behave in the outside world?
I'm going to even jump in and start.
Okay.
Because one of the things I've learned about this week with all the reflective practitioners we invited in, there's a lot of people who have been engineers. My husband was an engineer. He apparently built cities. And so when I was asked to look at cities, I don't do that work. But I have been looking at the consciousness and culture of cities. And I believe this week has woken me up to engineers are quite capable of love. So I am not going to underestimate the engineers in my life anymore. And I'm going to call them forth into the love they can express for the city. That's one of the things I learned from this group of people. You want me to pick who's next, Beth? And then you can go on?
I don't need to say anything more, but I would love to hear what tangibly is happening for our reflective practitioners in the work you do. And of course, people in the chat, right? And then we'll continue this thread in part 2. But does anyone feel like you just want to respond to that question? There we go, Stanley.
I feel called to respond as an engineer to what Mary Lynn just said. I find that intriguing because what is an engineer? I don't think there is no such thing as an engineer, you know. Blood pumps through everybody's veins, and we all struggle with our relationships on a daily basis like everybody else. And occasionally we do forget, of course, we do forget to connect to our feelings like most people do. And what comes up for me is that to actually think that we are the minority, some of us, sometimes I think like that, we are the minority when we meet and talk like this. When we meet and explore like this, I think we are the minority, but I don't think we are. I think this longing, there is a longing for this conversation to take place everywhere else where we turn up. And if we can bring those conversations to these places, to the places where engineers hang out, and bring it up, you know, bring the conversation about interconnectedness in spirit, and let that conversation take place, I think we will be surprised by the possibility or what comes up, you know. And so that's what I want to do, is to bring the conversation to those places where I doubt that it will be received with understanding, you know. Yeah.
Thank you. Who else wants to jump in and just share what is it that you're going to do differently?
I can jump in, but maybe before going to what I can do differently, I think it's brilliant. Speaking of engineers, it brought another idea into my head, which is, you know, in the process of learning and education, really incorporating that concept of oneness would allow engineers, architects, and a lot of the fields that are actually created under our way to separate, to become actors of union. And this would change everything, you know. So for me, Marilyn, what you say just allows me to strengthen my engineering capacity and put it into the function of what I do in education and everything else, because life usually tries to separate those. So this was really interesting. I'm going to bring more engineering into it.
Okay, thank you, Luz. Who else wants to remark?
I'll go. As the daughter of an engineer, I will speak. I have been re-inspired over this week. What I've learned is that the path, the calling, is resonating with so many. And I was finished teaching a class, which I mean, I'm not the same class, but I've been teaching for years. And every time the students come, every year they come, they're an epitome of the evolution, because they come with more understanding, they come with greater questions, they come with more sensitivity, they come with more consciousness. And for me, that has been it's been so joyful to see it in the lived experience of the different communities every year as they come in. I have learnt a lot. I'm inspired to continue enlivened. I feel enlivened, and in being enlivened, I can continue the work.
Thanks, Patty. It sounds to me like you're going to recalibrate, as Beth was saying, recalibrate your teaching, because your students are asking for more because they're evolving. Is that right?
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mm.
Taina.
Okay, now what I did differently after Wednesday and this week, I don't put thumbs up anymore. I put hearts. So I think today I was teaching those managers, and I put all the places those hearts, and they were like, what's going to happen? Why? But I put it for everybody. So I think that they got the idea that it's just heart that I want to give to them, not just thumbs up. And during the Christmas holidays, I was asking from the universe that how I can combine my teacher work, my work for startup ecosystem in city of Tampere and in this region, how I can put integral city framework together, and how I can do those things in here in Finland, and I think I have found quite not that's not clear yet, but I think I'm there in that path. And today when I talk with Tampere startup ecosystem civic servants, and I was so happy that they were talking like integral city about the voices that we have to listen, or not those words, but the story came there, so that I was quite happy that they have understood that not just the city and companies has to talk. They has to ask how citizens are thinking, what kind of innovations they can provide, and of course the Tribe Tampere community that we have about the third sector role. So I think they are starting to do the integral work, although they don't know it, but I think they are starting to do that, and I think that's what's it's coming clear what's my work in this world. So
sometimes when we're thank you, Taina. Sometimes when we're recalibrating, just holding the intention. And someone was talking about slow food, slow eating. Well, maybe slow life is what makes it possible for us to hold even longer. And you'd be surprised how the intelligence is in the system. Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
Who else has something to share about what you're going to do differently? Raji.
Sure, I'd like to chime in for just a second. My biggest takeaway, I think, from this week that will, I wouldn't say change the work I do, but certainly I will use it in the work that I do, is the idea of the city as a living organism, something that we aren't just living in or living off, but something that we are actually a part of. I think that's a very useful concept that I hadn't, which seems so obvious now that you've all said it, but wasn't something I've really framed in that way. And I think it's a very useful frame. Students who are aware of the SDGs, for example, or what's good to do for the environment, they often view these acts of agency as acts of charity, whereas they should be viewing them as acts of survival. And so thank you for that insight, everyone, because I think that will help me to frame some of my classwork in a way that might shift a perspective in some of the students to inspire even greater agency. So thank you.
That's beautiful. And it reminds me of Aurobindo, who asked us to have a karma yoga. So I even use the Master Code of Care every day, morning and night, as a karma yoga. And in our practices in our different cultures where ritual is used, it's actually a great way to invite people to discover their own karma yoga for serving a living system, serving the planet. Beautiful. Who else has something to share about what you're going to do? Julian, go ahead.
Yeah, listening to you, Marilyn, and seeing Louis' background picture, I was very much reminded about a saying that is a falling tree makes more noise than a slow-growing forest. And I feel I've been listening to the slow-growing forest here and really taken away with me to listen even deeper, not to what's making lots of noise on the surface, but really have a very, very open ear to what's happening underneath the noise and what's developing in my city and community to really be at service for it and to really be serving that living organism.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Julian. It took me a long time to even understand all the 12 intelligences in the first book that I wrote. They were evolutionary intelligences, but they themselves have their own intelligence. I looked first, where are the weak signals? Where's the science that points to this? And I was sharing earlier with Ugo, 20 years ago, no one else wanted to talk about this as related to city as a living system. And now I've spent a week with 24 people who have that as a frame. So it is something that can grow in the field. Michelle, do you have something to share?
Yes, this is actually my hoo-hoo. But yeah, I feel the slow very, very deeply, not just because it's winter time and the sirens just went off because a snowstorm is coming, but I feel the slow. The spirits have been saying that for years, go slow. And I feel what this week has given to me that could shift or bring something into the work that I'm doing is go further. And I quite often say that to my groups or individual processes with students is, I know you're there, just go further. And I say that to me when I hit a bump. And I say, okay, take a deep breath, go further. There's something. And it actually has confirmed in me a commitment I have had for some years, which feeling all of you and this whole week has been the vast importance of ceremony. Because the vibration, the intelligence of what we may hold in our body minds and in the field around us is really highlighted and expanded when we're in a ceremonial sacred place, especially in nature. So I'm going to be circling up with or without humans very soon. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mary Michelle. That's really become important to us here at Findhorn during the pandemic and trying to figure out how to ground ourselves. And ritual has become more important than ever, and we've had to create new rituals. So it's wonderful to have someone like yourself who has the gift of ceremony and ritual. So thank you. Take us further.
Right.
We need to learn.
Let's go.
Thank you. Let's go. So I think we can circle back to Hugo now. Would that be about right, Beth? I haven't lost count. I think everybody else has checked in. So Hugo, what have you got to share with us? What are you taking away that you're going to do differently?
So before sharing the vortex, then let me answer that question. And I think it grounded myself in my own city, and it grounded myself as a part of a living organism. And if I don't want to see the separation of the city with nature, then I have to acknowledge myself that being part of a city, I'm also part of nature. So I have to work it from there, and I have to play a role by working and by joining this conversation in an active way. So I think I'm just recalibrating again how can I infuse positive energy into my own city, which is a whole living organism anyway. So this is what I would differently. And in terms of the vortex, then I'm honored, and I think it's more a homage in French is the word. I don't know, homenage.
Homage.
I don't know the word in
Yes.
English.
Homage.
Is the same?
Yes.
Homage.
Yeah. Yeah.
To
Same.
all of
Yeah.
you. And the idea here was to use the golden ratio, the Fibonacci, as a way of putting all our thoughts together, starting from regeneration, relationships, energy, love. So you can keep exploring one by one, but it is taking the best of what I could into this vortex, together with the image that I have behind of the power of 10, and to see us as travelers, as citizens, and that we should be respectful with kindness, harmony. So all these kind of words, it really builds on a different type of energy: humility, community, reflective organs, evolutionary impulse. So I don't want to take the time of reading just one by one, but at the end, something beautiful just came up, which was about our roles and mobilization and behavior. It is this impulse that actually change what we are doing in reality. So to understand the potential of interconnectedness, but to be able to share, and this is cultural. And usually I use the cultural evolution idea as something that we need to come, but now in the middle just became this word that is joyful. So I don't think we need to be sad about doing the work that we do. We need to enjoy it. And by enjoying it, we actually infuse positive energy. And I think evolution is life, and life enhances love. And love is universal, but it is especially our universal magic. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Hugo. Give us a zoom back so we can see the whole thing and hold it in our hearts as one image before you take it off. There we go. Wow. We talked about this pattern is not only one that can represent the material world, but also the conversation, also the meaning making. And there, look, this is what's contagious. That image that you just put up, that's what's contagious as we make meaning together in telling our stories. Yeah, thank you. Really beautiful, really powerful. A poem, a visual poem. So, wow, I could do with a pause just to hold the grace and the intelligence that we've just all shared together. So maybe we can just take one breath together. Reconnect to our hearts. I want to express great gratitude for all the wisdom that's come through this circle. Gratitude for Beth, who's been co-hosting it with me. I invite Beth if she has any energy or words of recalibration that she might like to share.
Thank you, because I'm feeling that I need to check out too. So thank you, Marilyn.
Beautiful.
I'm sitting here in the contrast that Julian has offered, which yesterday was the islands of noise in contrast to the islands of calm. So I'm this islands of noise and then the quiet of the slow growing forest, and the beauty of those two things coexisting in me, in us, in our city habitats that we make for ourselves. And I've long been in this quest in the professional world to upgrade professional practice, which the engineers and the architects, et cetera, would understand what I mean there. But there's another layer to this that we're all in the journey on, which is what we're leaning into as our civic practice. And I end the call, I end the week thinking, what is that civic practice we're leaning into? That's what's got its hooks in me. So thank you, Marilyn. And I would like to just take a moment to thank all of I haven't even added up how many people have showed up from crazy time zones and times of day and normal time zones to share all that you are in this reflective way, so that we as humans can lean into being Gaia's reflective organs. Thank you all.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Beth. Beautiful way to conclude. Thank you. And I think it's time to invite Jim back in.
Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you, Beth. Thank you, everyone. This has been a very moving week for me. And I think, Hugo, you got the right word, homage. So I pay homage to all of you for taking us on such a heartful journey. Earth is a living system. And, and I think, Beth, your last note was a note that's, I think, important for us to underscore, because it goes back to my initial remarks on Monday morning from Aristotle, this notion of civic engagement. Aristotle said that it is civic engagement that is at the heart of defining who we are as human beings with each other. That's the polis. And I think this week has shown us, both by the dimensionality of all the subjects that have been covered, but also the heartfulness with which each and every one of you have expressed yourselves, what civic engagement really calls for. It calls for action, but it also calls for a certain beingness of harmony and coherence with one another. And I say this as an American citizen in a country where we've lost that heartfulness that binds the country together. And the divisiveness that's now ripping the country apart is because our hearts have been split asunder. And what this program this week has demonstrated so powerfully is what can ensue when our hearts are one. And that's what makes true civic engagement for the good of the whole possible, when our hearts are one. When our hearts are divided, we tend to use civic engagement for the good of ourselves and our group, as opposed to other people and other groups. So that was a beautiful note with which to bring our program to close. And once again, just to say that we're so excited at Humanity Rising as we're building this Masters in Regenerative Action as a result of the inspiration of Amsterdam. And I want to call everyone's attention to the course next week, Beyond Resilience, that would allow all of us to have a deeper dive into both some of the challenges and complexities of what it means to engage in real civic engagement in cities, which are such a fulcrum for human activity as we face the future. So thank you, everyone. Deeply appreciate this. And then next week, as I said yesterday, we're going to dive into what's been going on in one city in the world, Washington, D.C., and all the complexities that are now swirling around the capital of ultimate political power on planet Earth right now. And as we're seeing the results of what happens when a country breaks its heart. This is what happens when a country breaks its heart. And so what you've manifested has been such a balm, as it says in the scriptures, you've been like the balm of Gilead on our souls. So thank you, thank you, thank you. This is what the future needs to be all about. See you on Monday, same time, same station, 5 p.m. Central European time for the next session of Humanity Rising. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. And Beth and Marilyn, homage.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.